Welcome back. The Van Courtlandt Park Alliance teams up with Rooftop Films to present Story Ave, a film written and directed by Bronx filmmaker Aristotle Torres. The film follows a young and troubled teenage graffiti artist who robs an unsuspecting MTA worker, resulting in a life-changing experience for both individuals involved. Director Aristotle Torres now joins me to discuss the film. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I first want to just talk about the fact that Bronxites will just get the chance to see a screening of a movie like this. Can you just explain? And it's going to be at Van Courtlandt Park. Can you just talk about how this collaboration possibly began?
Yeah. So my distributor, Kino Lorber, you've reached out to Rooftop Films. And, for me, it was really important to share this story about the Bronx with Bronx residents. And, it was important for, at least to me, for it to be free. I want as much youth to come as possible because it is about the youth of the Bronx. And luckily, my partners were able to make it happen.
Now, I want to talk about the part where you said, it's free and it's a screening event.
Yeah.
Now, as somebody, I love watching movies, but oftentimes I have to go to Manhattan for a screening event, or, you have to go to other boroughs, maybe Brooklyn. Can you just talk about the importance of having something like this available in the Bronx for Bronx residents?
I mean, it was a massive priority for me, especially before we actually hit theaters and you have to pay to see it. It was important for me as a filmmaker and a resident of someone from the Bronx to make sure that the people who I made the movie for had an opportunity to see it, no matter what their situation is. And I don't have many demands, but that was one of them.
Now, I want to talk about just your background in general,
Sure.
being from the Bronx and, the path that you chose. So many people want to be on the path that you're on. Can you just talk about maybe, what inspired you to take this path and, how that all happened for you?
Yeah, I mean, it started off, shooting music videos, and just utilizing my network laterally. Sometimes it's important to, build community with the people that are around you more so than people who have maybe achieved a bit more than you. So just the friends and people that were around me were extremely talented, great musicians. And I used that opportunity and desire to tell stories through film as a way to hone my craft. And that's what's led me here.
And, I love what you just said just now that oftentimes I think a lot of creators or people, who just want to make stuff feel that
Sure.
they have to be around a specific type of people.
Sure.
Can you just talk about how you maybe overcame that and realized you were surrounded around so many people who were talented in their own right?
Yeah, I mean, I started off as an intern at Def Jam, so I saw what, the bigger directors were doing and the bigger creative directors were doing. And mentorship is so important. And one thing they would always explain to me was build with the people that are around you. So throughout my career, I've been a huge advocate of building a good tribe. I think, being an artist, especially living in New York City, it's a really tough road. And it's important to have a support system, not only emotionally, but creatively.
Now, I want to talk about Story Ave, which we had a little moment where I was like, is it Ave or Avenue?
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
love that it's Story Ave because I think it already kind of sets a tone of just where the movie's coming from. Without giving so much away, can you just tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, I think, when I think about this film, I think about family, the family you're born into versus the family you choose. And as someone who was, rambunctious and ambitious as a very young person growing up in the Bronx, you choose the people who you spend the most time with, some positive, some negative, but that's just a great representation of life, of balance, So I really wanted to make a film that was authentic to our community, but was also about, family and connection and, being inspired by the people around you artistically and emotionally.
Now, I understand the cast has some really amazing and talented people involved. Can you just talk about, how that came to be? And I'm really curious from your standpoint, do you get to choose who you want to be in the movie, or do you have specific people in mind when you are creating something like this?
Sure. Well, in this particular movie, our two leads are Asante Black from This Is Us and Luis Guzman, who is a national treasure of the Bronx. So I specifically wrote the role for Guzman, in his voice and his tone. But yeah, for me as a filmmaker, as a director, I think 90% of my job is casting in locations. That's what does so much of the heavy lifting on the screen. So it's one of the categories that I'm very meticulous and detailed about, because, you know, especially when you shoot indie film, you don't have a ton of time to discover and play and explore. You really have to like go in and get the scene done. So I was very fortunate as a first time filmmaker, of this being my first feature film, to have actors of this caliber who could take, you know, these words that I wrote and elevate it to a level beyond even my own understanding. So it was really a privilege.
Now, you said something that I thought was so interesting, and this has kind of been somewhat of a debate in just the movie making world for some time.
Hmm.
I mean, you said that you wrote the script, or, you know, you wrote the story with Louise in mind.
Hmm.
As you mentioned, he's like a huge part of the Bronx. Do you think that it's important to have people from those communities also tell those stories? Because I know oftentimes people, you know, sometimes they'll may cast somebody from Minnesota to play a New Yorker. You know,
Sure.
is that important to you when you're creating stories? And do you think people should think about that when they are casting?
Yeah, I think you should be really conscious about that. I believe in this theory called free real estate. You know, especially as a young filmmaker, is like, I want my actor to meet me more than halfway with what the character needs to deliver. So that way I can really focus on the nuances and the details of the performance. You know, so, you know, Asante, for instance, is not from the Bronx, but his attention to detail and the ability that he has with his craft, us working together, we're able to make that really authentic. Whereas Luis, he's already giving me so much free real estate that we get to really get into the nitty gritty of delivery and nuance. So I think it's about a balance, but I think it's really important to think about authenticity when casting, for sure.
Now, when speaking of authenticity, I mean, I love to see movies take place in New York, especially in the Bronx,
Mhm.
because that's not really a setting, especially the Bronx, that we see in movies often. Can you
Sure.
just talk about the significance of making sure that, you know, the Bronx was like almost a character in this movie as well?
Yeah, it was extremely important to me. I mean, you know, I'm from here, and I consider this the epicenter of culture. You know, Robert De Niro, Ralph Lauren. I mean, you know, so many influential iconoclasts who have influenced the world have come from this borough. But I think sometimes the general perception is not the output that we give the world. So it was really important for me to make an authentic film with its pros and its cons, but also showcase it in a way that felt artistic. So if, you know, when you watch the film, you'll see the way that I shoot it. I give a lot of care, and I care about the people and the community here. And it was important to shoot it in a way that felt not only authentic, but also cinematic.
Now, you talk about, you know, this is your first like feature
Hmm.
film, you know, and previously you were directing music videos. Can you
Hmm.
talk about that transition from, you know, short form storytelling to
Sure.
something that's a little bit longer?
Yeah, I mean, it was a tumultuous transition for sure. I mean, making movies is really really hard. Um, but you know, I think every artist has a desire, and for me, it was almost like a pain in my stomach of this like story that I had to tell. And I think when you make, you know, financing movies, getting distribution is just extremely difficult now, especially more than ever in our market. And I think you have to have a real need to tell a story and not just want to tell the story. So, you know, coming from short form storytelling, I knew that I wanted to make something a little bit closer to home, a little bit more authentic to my experience growing up in New York, specifically the Bronx. And this just felt like the right story and project to do that.
Now, as I mentioned earlier today, people will get a chance to see the screening. Can you
Yeah.
just talk about the time, the place, and, you know, what they can possibly expect?
Yeah, so it'll be tonight at Van Courtlandt Park. Doors open at 7 and the screening starts at 8:30. And I hope people come and say hi and ask questions and all that good stuff.
Now, what's something that you actually learned from this experience?
Oh my God, so much. Every day is a learning experience when making a film and even though it's not a studio film, it's millions of dollars and all these amazing actors and all these amazing collaborators and artists coming together to help me tell the story that's my baby. So every day you're kind of fighting against the current. But, you know, I think the biggest lesson coming from it is the balance of collaboration, but also maintaining your vision. You know, and how do you articulate your vision to your collaborators in a way that gives them room to have a voice in your story, but is also protecting your intention. You know, and I think that that's something you probably learn on every project as they get bigger. You know.
Now, I also want to talk about, I guess, the learning process. There's so many creative people here in the Bronx, and I think that with so many organizations like giving out resources, more and more people are, wanting to become storytellers.
Hmm.
But I do want to add, I had like a little experience like in a video production club where we made like short films.
Yeah.
It is not easy. It is very intense. Can you just talk about, what people can expect if they actually do want to enter this field?
Yeah, I think it takes a lot of resilience, and I think that practice makes perfect. It's a cliche, but you just need to do it. And even in my particular case, I made 4 short films before I made this feature. And it's Kurosawa, who's one of the greatest directors that had ever lived. On his deathbed, he said, "I'm still learning." So I think you have to go into it knowing that perfection is not real, or your perception of perfection. And it's about putting yourself out there and being vulnerable. And I'm just a huge advocate that the best art is vulnerable art. So as long as you put your heart and your soul into it, and you have really good intentions, and you really love whatever medium you're experimenting in, then you're probably on the right path.
Now, can you share what's next for you, or what are some plans that you have, or any upcoming projects?
Yeah, fortunately, we're in a writer's strike right now, so I'm kind of utilizing this downtime to write more scripts, so that way when the strike is done, I can continue telling stories that I'm really passionate about. And yeah, getting ready for the release of Story Ave, which comes out in theaters on October 6th. So doing the press for that and getting ready for that release. And, just really excited to share this story that's so close to my heart, personally, professionally, creatively, with the world. And just doing my best to make sure that people know about it, and there's awareness, and people go and see it.
Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing just a little part of that with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
If you would like to keep up with Aristotle and all the amazing and wonderful work he is doing, please follow him at Aristotle BAM. And remember, you can catch the screening of Story Ave later today in Van Courtlandt Park at 8:30 p.m. We've come to the end of our show today. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us, and you, the viewers, for tuning in. If you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the recable cast at 5 and 10 p.m. on Optimum Channel 67 and Verizon Files Channel 33, or watch anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. You can catch a brand new episode of Open with Darren Hymie on Wednesday, and with Rena Valentine on Friday. I'm Kibin Alleyne, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.